old school, or we got this going on?
Old school.
Is my screen gonna?
It will if you know how to use it. If you know how to flip it over. You want me to drive until you get it?
Oh, what do I do? Swipe left. Oh, that thing.
Welcome back. How was your time? Refreshing?
Survived it. Yeah.
Ice 9 kills. That's your brand.
Pardon?
Ice 9 kills.
Yeah.
You opened up the Reconvene fleet.
They're deceiving because
Oh yeah.
oh, good. Being 9:01, policy and governance. This is a recessed meeting. We re-adjourn with a motion.
Motion to reconvene.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye. And we'll start with Chantel.
No.
I received an email
Did you get an email?
late afternoon from Accenture yesterday, and they are indicating that while they need more time to review the scope and also bring something back to this committee for a price model that meets our requirements, they would need more time. I had asked for it to be submitted yesterday so I could bring it to you all today. And they said they needed more time, and that when I asked how much time they needed, and they said early next week would be when they feel like they would have that.
But as it sits right now, the 198.75. So 75,000 that they were looking for the one part was January, I think. But they're looking for 198 from here forward, correct?
Well, that was the amount stated in their RFP and in their presentation. Since with these negotiations, Accenture has lowered their price verbally. I don't have anything in writing. This is the one thing I've been asking for them for a few weeks, is to get something from them in writing. And that's what they need more time on. So I think they're negotiable at that number. I've been asking them, but I just don't have anything to offer you that would be firm. The only thing in writing I have is 198,000.
What was the other number that they gave you?
Yesterday they threw out a 158 number.
But that's still a flat fee.
It is.
Based upon
Yes.
all of those items. And
all of those items at
all
any
of those
time.
items in the RFP. And should the board decide they were going to do a limited program, which would entail limited interaction with the consultants,
They would
we
still
would be
expect
paying
that amount.
$168,000 for something less than what, right?
One month could be a lot, the next month could be a little, and they would have the same
As I
price.
understand kind of the process, right? We put out a request. These are services we may be looking for. What would you charge us if we did the whole thing? They said 198 plus they included hourly rates.
Yes, that was the.
Which apparently they don't really do hourly rates, but they included it just to be able to meet the bid.
Yes.
So again, like I said yesterday, the board hasn't determined what programs, anything. I could understand a higher cost on the front end potentially, as they're helping us to work through issues, what we may be able to do, what we might want to do, et cetera. But as those things fall off, the rate should certainly fall off as well. And that's why the billable hours is probably the best, keeping with what Miles had said, up to $198,000 per month. I think that's what you said the other day, right, Miles?
I was just saying that we could do it up to.
Yeah.
Right.
So
They just, when I recommended that, they said that they don't have any way to bill by hourly rates
but they
for
put it
the work
in
that they do,
response.
just as, yeah, they did.
All right. So they said early next week being.
They did not give me a day or a time.
So BOCC meets Monday.
Yes.
We,
I would not expect anything before Tuesday, given my conversations with them this week. Just getting a lot of pushback. They don't have.
But what if we plug in the 168 to that document for March, April, May, and June? And then if they can't produce us anything to go along with this for the agenda item from Monday by the end of day today, we'll just let the commissioners decide if they want to go a next step or pass what we've got in front of them, and then continue to work on the billable hours for the next contract. Because at this point, if they're not in-house working with us, we have issues with the items before us that we got to get moving, especially when they talk about deadlines and us being, when I refer to deadlines, the federal government saying, we're going to fine you or find you did not follow this per this report. But we've got deadlines coming up that are concerning to me.
Is that are you making a motion as such that? I don't think it's a bad idea.
Verbally yesterday.
She'd said 158. I think it was do go with.
Oh, it's 158? I thought I heard 168. My apologies.
They were both mentioned verbally. Yesterday was the lower of the two. Was the first that number was thrown out there.
58 it is. Put it on the contract. Let's roll.
So the way the contract is drafted now is that it has to one and not to exceed amount, which would be the 158 times 4, March, April, May, June. And then it stipulates 198 per month rate. Is kind of how it's worded.
what are the concerns that you have, Michael, with regard to the reporting? I mean, the one decision that I'm aware of that we need to make is the calculation of the lost revenue. April 1st.
Yeah, and we continue to get emails saying that our January report's not complete, even though all those numbers were supposed to shift to April. We also get an email that says, if you do not list all your expenditures and your projects by the April 30th
Is that
report.
Since I don't see any of this, sorry, some of my questions are probably may seem annoying, but if you don't list all of your projects, is that projects that are contemplated or projects that have begun? Because we haven't begun any projects.
Right. I think the matter is we haven't filled in the blanks, and that's where in the reporting, that's where we're getting and I don't know if it's automatic emails coming back or not, but when they're coming every other day saying we haven't done this or we haven't done that, and then if the April 30th report does not have these items in it, what's the next step? Do they start saying, well, maybe you don't need all your money? I don't know what the next step is.
Even if we can't April, do you think Marla or somebody?
Can you use the microphone so you can be heard?
If for some reason we're not able to get this vendor or another vendor on board prior to the April 30 deadline to get all that stuff done, do you think we could reach out possibly to Marla or somebody in her office to maybe help look at some of those documents? Since they're the ones that are going to be auditing and they're currently auditing CARES, they may be able to help. Because my understanding with talking with John over there, I think they've read the act and have a pretty good understanding of it. So they may be able to look at some of these emails that you're getting and also help with the filling out. I'm not saying that they can. I'm just making a suggestion that we reach out to them and see if they can help us determine what we're missing in the reports that we've currently submitted, or it could just be basically a form email. Since we haven't elected any projects yet, they may just be sending that out, and the folks next door in the auditor's office may be able to shed some light on some of that. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, not a lot of faith over there. Federal funds, state interaction, federal funds telling us, yeah, that seems like a. Yeah.
Not, Miles, I'm not talking about telling us how to do. I'm just saying on the form,
Yeah, I don't even want to crack that door.
well, they're gonna be auditing some of that kid.
They're not the ones I'm worried about.
Okay, so since it appears we're steaming towards doing this, Chantel, do you have the document that you provided us yesterday?
The one I emailed yesterday, I just had one copy. When I would hit print, my copier was still asleep. So I have one copy here. From what I could tell, there was one change that you all had not seen in a meeting just yet, and that was in the scope. I kind of mentioned that in a previous email.
Yeah.
Sorry, lots of emails this week. But I can read that.
Well,
Or if you had other things to
Yeah,
kind
I
of go
have
through.
okay. I have other things.
No
So
problem.
do you guys have the document? Okay. So page 1, and I believe I'm working off the document that you sent yesterday afternoon.
Okay.
The term. I would propose that it should read, the term of this agreement shall be effective upon signature of both parties and notice to proceed has been issued, period. This agreement shall expire on June 30, 2022. Okay, that's that first paragraph there. Then they have some redundant language in there. When you look at the second sentence where it says, for 3 additional years, the start of each year coinciding with the start of the client's FY July 1, you can delete the start of each year. It's for an additional 3 years coinciding with the start of our FY. So that, I don't understand that. The next one, the rates outlined in the original agreement will remain fixed and will not increase in any future agreement extensions unless agreed to by the parties in writing. If you all are headed towards, we're going to look at 100 and whatever, 58, 68, whatever, and then on the backside come back.
Why would you want to do that?
Well, do you want to lock us into paying 148, 58, or 68, or $98,000 a month when we may not be getting a full menu of services?
I absolutely like their language. The rates outlined in the original agreement will remain fixed and will not, here's the key word, increase in any future agreement extensions. It does not mention that it won't be able to decrease.
That's fine. If you want to leave it like it is,
I understand, Joe, but I mean, if it says
okay.
increase versus decrease, I mean, if it's a decrease,
All right.
I might be with you.
I'm cool, Miles. That's fine. All right. Section 3, Chantel, the warranties.
Yes.
In 3, they now do have the 45 and 35 day issue outlined. In Number 4 there, acceptance. It says written notice within 45 business days. In the section above, the warranty section, it just says it's brought to its attention within 45 days after the work has been performed. I'm wondering if they don't want to have business days in that as well, so that that language mirrors each other.
Same with section 5, 30 business days to be uniform.
Payment shall be made within 30. Yeah, that's fine.
Those are general payment terms.
Yep.
That's simple.
It is. I just wanted to ask.
Okay.
If they're fine. That's fine.
Were we going to insert I'm in section 5, were you going to insert or recommend inserting shall not exceed $198,000 per month or whatever that
Yes.
number is? Okay.
Let's agree to that number right now. Let's just get that out of the way. Are we putting 158, 168? You said the number yesterday tossed out by them was 158. You have no written. It was purely verbal. I get it.
Correct. They have pressed more than once that they would rather negotiate price than their retainage fee.
So 158 sounds, if we put something in, the lowest number we've got so far.
Hey, Joe, before you
We
move
could
on,
go even lower.
on sections
Right.
4 and 5, you want to include a statement in there that those do not apply to the indemnification language paragraph.
Yeah, but let's come back to that. Thanks for reminding me of that. Okay, so 5, payments, taxes, program fees, etc. Chantel, you mentioned the 30 business days. We just talked about whatever that number is shall not exceed amount per month. Price includes all related travel expenses and applicable taxes. Any idea what those would be? Okay.
No.
Says they'll invoices in accordance with the schedule below. And they still have in here deliverable number 1, work reports for January 2022, delivered date 1/31/22. Is anyone in receipt of those?
No.
Okay.
What was your question? Sorry, I was reading.
My understanding is they're waiting till their contract's in place to give us that report.
Right, but they sent us this draft proposal initially, correct? And in this draft proposal, they recognized, or they stated that they would perform no work until a contract had been signed and a purchase order issued. So, okay. Additionally, as the agreement is written, it's effective upon the last signature of the parties, right? So if the board were to pass something on March the 7th, the Centra may sign it prior, or it may be a day or two afterwards. But a PO would have been issued, or an encumbrance would have been issued just ahead of the March 7th date, right? And that encumbrance would reflect what date? The day at which it's done, or?
Yes, the encumbrance date is the day the PO is converted. It's dated that day,
Which would predate
the contract.
the performance of the work. So I'm just not sure that I can go that route, but I'm one person. Okay. What, Chantel, in that same section where it says any additional services to be performed during or after the contract period will be subject to a separate agreement pursuant to the, is that would be anything that is not outlined in the scope of work, correct?
Yes, I think that is their general language to say regarding amendments that no other work should be performed unless additional to the contract without an amendment. There's similar language like that throughout the agreement.
All right, go to page 11, please. Miles, that's 20. And Michael, we're in section 20. Applicable county and federal terms. Again, to my point earlier about the agreement that they have proposed.
This document that you have is slightly different than what was emailed to you all.
Is it
There's just one change that's not in with theirs, but we'll get to it when we get there.
okay? One change from yesterday afternoon's document.
Yes.
Okay.
You said
So-
page 11? I'm sorry.
Paragraph 8 there, where it talks about encumbering funds and where those funds are encumbered from,
And this
et
is what they
cetera.
don't have.
Hmm?
This is the paragraph they don't have,
Yeah,
the change.
They don't, or we don't?
You two don't have what? He's gonna suggest different language. The copy you have shows American Rescue Act, I'm sorry, American Rescue Plan Act funds just inserted in there.
This is page 11.
There's still say county for fiscal year 2021, 2022. Paragraph 8, page 11.
so I appreciate trying to clarify that it's not coming out of our general fund budget and that it's using ARPA funds. It's not really written well.
Right.
There are some things missing. I'm not exactly sure why this is needed anyway, other than to clarify that
That you're
we're using
encumbering out
ARPA
of.
funds, but
General
Oh.
language out of our other agreements, it's always has been there, paragraph. And the language just indicates that you're encumbering monies out of unencumbered funds. In this case, you're right, Joe, because it's a different pot of money, different needs, we may not need that sentence altogether.
So let's do this. The copy that I got from you yesterday, on page 11, there is paragraphs 4, 5, and 6. So let's figure out exactly where you two are looking at. Are we,
At the top of page 11, where it's blue,
yeah, what page 11 looks like.
is that the email that you received? Okay.
Looks like. Consultant shall not perform. Consultant receive a purchase order. Da, 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 da.
Yes.
Just
so why can't,
Is there a better way to word it?
why couldn't it just say the consultant shall not perform any services until the consultant receives a PO from Oklahoma County showing the full amount of the obligation created pursuant to this agreement has been encumbered from within an unencumbered amount previously appropriated, period.
Yes.
Then you could strike for such purpose was within the budget of Oklahoma County for FY 21-22, and then continue to strike utilizing American Rescue Plan Act funds through the period, and then
Yes.
leave the balance of the deal, put in whatever amount
Cleans
it
it
is
up.
you all are wanting to do. Is that works?
I think that works. It's pretty
Okay.
pretty clean, simple.
whoever formatted the scope, I appreciate. My formatting skills weren't great.
Oh, it's fine. Are you on page 20?
Yes. Page 20, paragraph 2.
And the red text is what Accenture has proposed to change from the language that I had submitted to them.
So the copy that you just brought. That's- Yeah, we got marked up.
Okay, so the language that they're wanting to change specifically in that second paragraph that begins additionally, Accenture will ensure, they're striking the words will ensure.
Yes. Yes,
The-
they don't want to be reliant.
The ensure language comes directly from our RFP. Right, RFP says intent, and I can read it all, or I can skip down to the line that has the word ensure in it. It's y'all's preference. I'll skip to the line. Planning, oversight, and administration of ARPA funds and ensure Oklahoma County is in compliance with applicable federal and state laws, regulations, procedures, grant funding requirements while maximizing the recovery and beneficial uses of ARPA funds for Oklahoma County citizens. That language comes directly from the RFP. And one of the reasons we hired a consultant, to Michael's earlier points about getting these emails regarding the reporting, is to ensure that we're in compliance.
And their position is
I
they can't,
guarantee you what I know what their position is.
Right.
They cannot ensure
right,
an elected official is going to.
act upon their advice is the terminology they provided.
They don't have the ability to ensure that a public body votes the way that they recommend. That's just. They can ensure that their recommendations are in compliance. They can't ensure the way that the elected officials act. But if they could, it'd be some pretty good luck.
Okay, well, if you want to leave it the way it's currently written, additionally, Accenture recommendations.
No, I think you could combine the two and become where each party would probably be agreeable. So Accenture will ensure that their recommendations to Oklahoma County that will include considerations of compliance with applicable federal and state laws. So they will ensure that their recommendations, because with removing recommendations and ensuring that Oklahoma County will act in a certain way, they cannot ensure that. I understand their point. I understand your point. They can ensure that their recommendations are in compliance. I believe that's what you're looking for, is that their recommendations are in compliance. So if you want to ask that they ensure that their recommendations are in compliance and not ensuring how the elected officials will vote, I'm sure that would be amenable to.
I get that part of it, Miles, but also part of this is if we're asking them to help us with our reporting, they need to ensure that what they're doing is in compliance, right?
But it's still a recommendation, just like an insurance, just like the one upstairs at the fifth floor. That's still a recommendation. You can get a legal opinion from them all day long. They can tell you how to act all day long, and then the elected officials can come down here and act in an entirely different way.
Hey, Joe, what about if you said ensure county's reporting requirements?
That would just be one aspect though.
Right, you just add that to what you guys have said.
Then you just ask, you're ensuring compliance in one area only. I mean, if you're ensuring that their recommendation, even a recommendation for their reporting, because again, if they fill out the report, if they give it to the county votes to accept the report, file it, they still cannot ensure that there's not something that happens in between the time that they give it to us or that the county officials don't change it on the horseshoe. I understand their point to it. I understand your point to it because you want to make sure that what they're giving the elected officials is 100% compliant. I think combining the two would probably suffice for both.
And Miles, my suggestion was just add a sentence on top of those two further. They will ensure that county reporting is compliant. Because that's not a recommendation from them.
It is right because they don't get the. I mean, if they filed it, and it was their name on the bottom of it, we were asking them to take 100% control over it. That would probably be different. But the county official has to sign off on it, and they cannot ensure that nothing has changed. I mean, it's just a chain of custody thing, right? They can't ensure when they let go of it.
So in that paragraph, if we do include will ensure recommendations, what else did we, if we put that back, what else in that paragraph?
It was feverishly right. Nope.
Will include considerations of compliance.
Additionally, Accenture will ensure regulations include considerations of compliance
You
with
can't-
applicable federal.
Include considerations is different than ensuring consider, right? So we need to massage that if that's
I
your,
don't disagree with that. Who did the will include consideration of?
that was
Accenture.
them. They're lawyers.
Will ensure their recommendations to Oklahoma County will be compliant with.
Additionally, we will ensure that will include considerations of compliance. It kind of cracks open a door there.
Tell you what,
Accenture will ensure their recommendations to Oklahoma County will be compliant with applicable federal and state laws.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a 10-minute recess, 5-minute recess? So I can write.
All right, it's been motion to have a recess. We'll reconvene at 9:45.
Oh, yeah, 9:40.
About 9:40.
9:40.
But then that doesn't allow me time to go where I want to
Oh,
go.
yeah, okay. You're driving. 9:45 it is.
All right, motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We will recess.
What, Chantel, between you and me, what did the original paragraph say? Did it say, well, hell, I've got 5 different copies.
Maybe next time.
Be 9:45, entertain a motion to return from recess.
So move.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right. I appreciate the opportunity to have a minute to work on this. So I wish Miles were here because I think the language that I'm going to propose will meets with what he was talking about. So Michael, I would propose that in the scope there, the paragraph that begins additionally, that we strike all of that new language and that we instead add to the a new sentence to the paragraph immediately preceding that says, in the performance of these duties, Accenture shall ensure that all recommendations to Oklahoma County are in compliance with applicable federal and state law, rules, regulations, policies, and procedures, as well as any grant funding requirements relative to ARPA or any other federal and state funding received by the county for the purposes set forth in paragraph 2.1 below. Did you catch that, Miles? So, in the performance of these duties, Accenture shall ensure that all recommendations, following along with your language, to the county are in compliance with federal, state law, rules, regulations, policies, procedures, and grant funding requirements of the ARPA or any other federal or state funding we receive.
And that's all then in the first paragraph.
Yeah, that would all be in the first paragraph.
Okay.
So we would strike the paragraph, Miles, the second paragraph, the additionally, all of that new language, and strike that and insert the new language in the paragraph preceding. So their recommendations, and then to your point, the board can take them or leave them.
Who you're striking the last.
I would be, yeah, my proposal is to strike everything and that's in that paragraph additionally.
From that, your new paragraph ends at set forth in section 2.1 below, correct?
Yeah. And if, I mean, I see the sentence you're referring to now.
Yeah.
My concern, they're gonna want to die on a hill over that. Although I thought in other areas they'd made it clear that they weren't providing legal advice. That was in the
Yes.
indemnification section, as I recall. I
That's-
don't know that it's necessary here, but if you want to put that in at the tail end.
No, I just wanted to be clear. I didn't.
Yeah.
Well,
It is definitely, and it's later on also under assumptions.
Yeah.
Where they clearly
So
indicate.
I'm fine with my motion. I appreciate you pointing that out, though. But that would be my motion. That we would strike all of that language in the paragraph additionally, and then insert in the first paragraph the language I just read as a means of trying to meet halfway.
it's called compromise. It's a big word. We
Right.
should send this.
No.
in reference to scope and those two paragraphs, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. And I'll give this to Chantel.
Motion is
Before
second.
you, before we vote, can I just read it?
Yeah, if you can.
Anything else on that paragraph?
No, sir.
Motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
All right, and then I think, Chantel, was there something else that you said that,
The only other notes that I have is the numbering is off throughout the scope, and I'll fix the numbering.
okay, then what is the number per month, the up to per month number that we're now looking at?
The last number they gave for was
692. The total
From
not to exceed
cumulative?
amount.
No, what, the number that they, what is the number that they verbally gave you?
158,000.
Okay,
changed all references from 198 or whatever they are to show that 158 number. And then whatever the cumulative is for March, April, May, June.
the not exceed amount of the contract would be $632,000 for March, April, May, and June.
And do we entertain additional 75,000
Yep.
for March?
I'm not,
632, so that's 705. Not to exceed
I have 707. 632 plus the 75. I'm sorry, is that what was said?
Yep.
no, I'll vote against that.
Okay. All right, just to
So-
confirm, for March would be 158 plus 75 is 233, which
If
would
you-
be 707,000.
So if you all would do me this so that I don't have to vote against all of this, if we could break this out so that the document would reflect, this is my motion, the document reflects $158,000 as the not to exceed price per month for the period March, April, May, and June for a not exceed amount in the contract of $632,000.
I believe that report that they're stating is $75,000 helps us determine whether we go left in our programs or we go right in our programs. Whether there's a direction of lion's share of these dollars going to construction of jail, or if it's only a portion
I
of
was
those
unaware-
dollars.
I understand maybe what that report contains, but I was unaware that this group had made a recommendation to the board or that the board itself had asked for a report in January.
Understandable. The other thought is there's also within this report supposedly grant dollars outside of ARPA that we could go after as a whole as well.
And let me, yeah, Cody, that's where I'm going. Had we been able to enter into a contract immediately upon award of the bid, those services would have been included in the monthly amount, right?
So if we asked it this month, would be part of it.
Yeah, if they were asked in January, we've saved February, which would be at the old rate, 198, plus we didn't pay January in the entirety of 198, so it'd actually be 190.
I get it. It's a business decision.
Right.
It's a business decision for them. Do they want to accept a contract proposal at $158,000 a month, which is the fee that they're proposing that,
I'll make this, you don't want to vote no on stuff. I'll make a motion that we enter into an amount of $158,000 per month for March, April, May, and June of this fiscal year.
March, April, May, and June,
Yeah.
158.
Yes, per month.
Yeah. And a contract amount not to exceed $632,000.
No,
Sorry.
I'll just give you an easy one
Yeah.
to agree on the monthly.
Well, I still don't understand how we're going to get past the encumbrance will indicate it's done Monday, theoretically, right? The encumbrance date will be March the 7th. The invoice will be March how many days are in March? 31?
Yes.
Whatever. March 31st will be the invoice date. I just, and a blanket, if approved, would also be approved on March the 7th, theoretically. The PO is issued to them on March the 7th. It's a hurdle I just can't, in my mind, get past. So, I mean, I'll withdraw my motion.
Miles, you had a motion. What was it again?
Just a motion for the months of March, April, May, and June for $158,000 to be placed into the contract, which was the verbal amount presented to Intel over the phone yesterday. That's in agreement for those months and this FY only.
With these changes, will you direct me to submit it to the DA for a review?
Isn't that our standard procedure?
It is. I was just wondering if that would be the direction. She has already weighed in on the first draft that was submitted to her. And it was the recommendation from that office that a not to exceed amount must be included in the contract.
That's fine. Let's cross that bridge here in a second. The motion is for these months and these months only.
Okay.
For March, April, May, and June, at $158,000 a month. I second that motion. We have motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Additionally, I'll make the motion for that contract not to exceed $707,000 for this FY.
707,000 would be, if my math is any good.
To expire June 30th, 2022. Okay.
Second. Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
No.
All right.
I have one question about the pricing section. They give a schedule 1 through 6. That schedule should be removed, kept, edited in the same area, which is page 2. We're under the payment and fees.
Okay.
Where we just indicated the amounts you all voted on, and they have a little table inserted in that.
Yep.
I think initially that table was informational. I'm just wanting to clarify if any changes need to be made to that or there.
I don't believe we need it in there. It's a matter of language throughout this document talks about following reports and regulations of the ARPA Act.
Okay, there's a whole section that talks about the 2 biweekly work reports, and I just wanted to make sure if you felt that was repetitive or not.
It is.
Chantel,
Yes.
I can't recall, is, one of the reasons the table is here is those are also the times that they would report to this group as the project manager, correct?
Yes, basically their billable schedule or when the reports would be submitted.
So we do need to leave some reference to that in.
I don't think there's any problem with that table remaining. Obviously, deliverable number 2 would be different. The amounts would obviously reflect the 158 that we accepted,
Sure.
not only in the above paragraph, but also in the table. As far as the 2 bi-weekly work reports and the deliverable amount, I don't have a problem with the table. I mean, if the table needs to go, we need to figure out how to. Remind me, Chantel, does it say anything about bi-weekly reports anywhere else in the contract? And if so,
Don't recall that.
Yes.
probably under deliverables.
Yes, in the scope of work section for deliverables, it explains the 2-week reports and what it entails.
Okay.
And
Then
I
to
did-
Michael's point, take it out, that's fine.
It was part of my notes about repetitive items, so I just wanted to ask.
Contract with repetitive items. Lawyers? Nah,
Unless
that's impossible.
it helps with clarity, we can
No, that's fine.
definitely keep it in.
If that's.
They have 2 sentences underneath that table that can remain or.
Well, I would say those were part of the table. They wouldn't make sense when the table's not there. And they're crossed out under the whole second program. Who crossed out 7.1 on page 27?
Accenture crossed that out and then placed it back into the beginning of the document on
Oh, sure.
on page 2. They just moved it.
But then the language we're referring to in deliverables covers those items.
What was your question about the last 2 sentences underneath the table?
Whether the intention was to keep them or remove them with the table. The first sentence, changes to this fee agreement must be made in writing, which we have.
That a fee agreement would be management services and deliverables is US $158,000 per month.
Yes.
So that would be referencing that statement. Correct?
Yes.
With or without a table.
Yes.
Okay. That would benefit us. We wanted to add to or subtract from, correct? So that line probably needs to stay. Any additional services to be performed during or after the contract period will be subject to a separate agreement pursuant to appropriate client procurement processes. Again, outlining clearly what that step will be should we want to add or increase or decrease. Those probably ought to stay. But that's just me. Anybody object to that?
Well, is that language not there under 22 on page 26?
So
I mean, if it's somewhere else.
we're on page 3, correct? I'll make sure I'm looking at the right document.
Yeah, it's
Okay, so I thought earlier I had gone through all my changes, but if we're giving consideration, Miles, the paragraph, Michael, the paragraph, any additional services to be performed during or after the contract period will be subject to separate agreement. I believe we need to insert language beyond those in the scope of service. Beyond those contemplated in this agreement, something that makes it clear that it's something outside the menu of the 32 items.
Which that same language is page 26 under deliverables, unless otherwise agreed to in writing by parties. The above describes the censure's complete scope of service.
Right. So I would just make it beyond those identified in attachment A, scope of services, comma, to be performed during or after the contract period, subject to separate agreement. And to Michael's point, it makes reference throughout, but just additional clarification.
All right, so we're adding those lines to the second paragraph of the now deleted paragraph or table on page 3. All right, so how will that paragraph read on page 3?
So you want to put that in the, any additional line, correct?
Yeah, so it would
Yep.
read, any additional services, comma, beyond those in the identified attachment A, scope of service, beyond those identified in attachment A, scope of services, comma, to be performed during or after the contract period will be subject to a separate agreement. So it's essentially an amendment or another. Yeah.
Okay, with that motion,
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Further questions? Suggestions?
No, I can have these edits done today and sent back to all of you. And my next step, I believe, is to submit this to Accenture
Well,
and to the district attorney's office for review as the final.
let me do this because I believe and I'd prefer that we need to recommend something to the BOCC for them to continue to work forward. So I'm going to recommend that our changes be made and sent forward to them today. And then you also take it up to the 5th floor to be reviewed. And then for this item to be on the agenda for BOCC March 7th. And then if they have any changes, they'll have to deal with the commissioners. Or if the commissioners decide March 7th to allow us to move forward and continue with changes, then we'll go from there.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, does anyone remember how I said that? I motion that we recommend with these changes, they be provided to the BOCC March 7th, and that purchasing director goes to the assistant district attorney and then sends our changes to Accenture.
Second.
Would you be willing to make 2 recommendations? One, to include the not to exceed amount of 707,000, and one to include a not to exceed amount $632,000.
I think you can make a separate motion if you want to.
I'm just asking.
My motion would be the contract was $707,000. And we'll entertain a
You got a
second option in a different motion.
So you got a motion in a second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
I abstain.
And then, did you want an item or a motion?
Yeah, my motion would be that we also include as a recommendation to the BOCC a contract with the exact same language, pending DA approval, with a not to exceed amount of $632,000, up to $632,000, which would be inclusive of individual not to exceed amounts of $158,000 per month for March, April, May, and June. That would be my motion.
I'm going to second that motion, as it's a recommendation to the commissioners for them to choose. Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 No.
All right. I think, did we change recommendations or correct the document? Send that to censure and fifth floor and have it on BOCC's March 7th agenda. Are there any items?
You're gonna put 2 items on the agenda
Yes,
for Monday?
yes, I'll place those items on the agenda.
And are there any other items to discuss before this body? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before
Citizen
express
participation.
my appreciation to Chantel and her folks and the folks at Essentia for the work that they've been doing, trying to get this done. I recognize that they, Essentia, are trying to protect their best interest, and that is exactly what the work that we are attempting to do, is protect the best interests of the citizens of Oklahoma County. So I understand. What was your word, Miles? Compromise?
Yeah, it's
So
it's an
Chantel,
old
thank you.
English word that we're trying to reinvigorate and bring back into common language.
Only it would happen at MLB, right?
They're rounding third right now. They're doing it. Let's just hope they don't get kind of run down. Pickle.
We don't need an extended game of pickle. All right.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.